I was cornered in the cramped kitchen, the sound of the family laughing outside, right before the Thanksgiving prayer. My stepmother's hand struck my face, not for spilling food, but because she feared I would reveal the secret she had kept for more than 10 years. I knelt beside them, eyes down. Everyone's eyes were closed, but his were not. My grandfather was staring right at the mark. My name is Dylan Carroll. I am 28 years old, and I am a ghost. In Savannah, Georgia, I am real. I am a prep cook and occasional server at a small boutique hotel. I am the smell of clarified butter, thyme, and industrial-strength sanitizer. I am the burn lines on my forearms from the oven racks and the ache in my feet after a 14-hour double shift during wedding season. In Savannah, I pay my rent, I buy my own groceries, and I am invisible in the way that all service workers are, which is its own kind of peace. But here, I am a ghost. This is the Thanksgiving gathering at the ancestral farm, the sprawling colonial-era estate outside Richmond, Virginia, that serves as the heart of the Lane family empire. It is the home of my grandfather, Walter Lane, the founder of Lane Foundry and Steel. This farm, with its ancient oak trees and sweeping lawns maintained by crews who arrive before dawn, is not a home. It is a symbol. It is the stage where the family performs its yearly ritual of tradition, unity, and the silent, brutal renegotiation of power and money. And I am the specter at the feast. The main dining room was already set, a sea of white linen, polished silver that reflected the gray November light, and centerpieces that cost more than my monthly paycheck. The air was thick with the manufactured warmth of the holidays. The deep, savory scent of roasting turkey, the sweet spice of simmering cranberries, and the acidic tang of expensive wine already being poured. Laughter, high and forced, drifted in from the parlor. I was in the back kitchen, the cramped, overheated utility space where the real work happened. My job, as always, was to stay out of sight and assist the hired caterers. Then she entered. Vivian Lane, my stepmother, did not walk into rooms. She annexed them. She was wearing a cashmere dress the color of oatmeal, so perfectly understated it must have cost thousands. Her blonde hair was flawless, her makeup subtle, her presence on the family's social media accounts a curated masterpiece of philanthropy and gracious living. She was the envy of Richmond society, the woman who had saved my father after my mother's death, the perfect hostess. Behind the scenes, she was a creature of cold efficiency and targeted cruelty. Her gaze swept the kitchen, bypassing the caterers, and landed on me. Dylan, her voice was never loud. It was a precise, quiet instrument, designed to cut. The pies! I pointed to the cooling rack. They're fine. Just the pecan left to set. She glided over, her perfume, something heavy and floral, like gardenias fighting for air, stifling the smell of the food. She inspected the pumpkin pie I had been tasked with. "The crust," she whispered, leaning in as if sharing a secret. "It's burned." I looked. The edges were a dark, rich brown, perhaps a minute past perfect, but certainly not burned. "Vivian, it's fine. It's just caramelized." "It's burned," she repeated, her voice dropping lower, colder. "You always push it too far, always doing the most, and it always ends in a mess, just like your mother." I flinched. The air left my lungs. This was her true skill, finding the softest part of you and inserting the knife with surgical precision. She loved to invoke my mother, Elena, the nurse who had been my father's first wife, the before picture he was encouraged to forget. "You are an embarrassment." "Dylan," Vivian continued, her eyes fixed on the pie. "This family took you in. Walter lets you come here. And my God, you look like you just rolled out of a truck stop. You are the unwanted child, the loose thread. You should be grateful you are even allowed in the kitchen." I should have stayed silent. For 10 years. I had stayed silent. I had learned to swallow the insults, to make myself small, to retreat back to Savannah and my real life. But something about this year felt different. Maybe it was the exhaustion from my job, or the fact that grandfather had specifically requested I come. Or maybe it was the email. I had been in the small, freezing sunroom earlier, using the old family laptop to check the bus schedule for my return trip. The screen was cluttered. Vivian's email was still logged in, and a new message had popped up in the preview pane. A bank notification. I would have ignored it, but the subject line caught my eye. Hope Horizons Initiative, wire confirmation. Hope Horizons was one of the family's flagship charities, the one Vivian poured her energy into, the one that got her photographed at galas. Curious, I had clicked it. The email was a simple confirmation of a transfer, a very large transfer, 6 figures, but the beneficiary account wasn't a charity. It was an offshore holding company in the Caymans, and the routing number looked familiar. Leave the pie, Vivian, I said, my voice shaking just slightly. It's not important. Not important? She turned, her smile a perfect, terrifying mask. Image is everything. Is that why you're moving money from the Hope Horizons Fund? The words hung in the air, suddenly louder than the clatter of pots and pans. Vivian's smile did not fade, but it froze. The blood drained from her face, leaving the flawless makeup sitting on pale, tight skin. She stared at me, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. The bustling kitchen noise seemed to fade into a dull roar. What? She said, not a question, but a demand. The laptop in the sunroom, I said, my heart hammering. I felt stupid, reckless. An email popped up, a transfer from the charity fund to some company. In the Caymans, it looked like the same account number your brother uses for his import business. She moved faster than I thought possible. Her perfectly manicured hand shot out and gripped my wrist. Her nails, painted a deep, blood red, dug into my skin. You little sneak, she hissed, her voice a venomous spray. She dragged me backward, out of the line of sight of the caterers, pinning me against the cold metal of the industrial refrigerator. You think you are so clever. You think you can come into this house and threaten me? I wasn't threatening, I stammered, trying to pull my arm free. Her grip was iron. You have no idea what you are playing with, she snarled, her face inches from mine. The gardenia perfume was overwhelming, making me gag. You know nothing. I know what I saw, Vivian. That was the mistake. Her hand released my wrist only to swing through the air. The sound was a sharp, wet crack that echoed in the small space. My head snapped to the side, my hair flying into my face. A blinding, white-hot pain exploded from my cheek, radiating up to my ear and down my jaw. The world went silent for a beat, replaced by a high-pitched ringing. My eyes watered instantly. A reflex of pain and shock. I tasted copper. She hadn't slapped me because of a burned pie. She hadn't even slapped me for the insult. She had slapped me because she was terrified, and she had just confirmed my suspicion was true. We need everyone for the blessing, a cousin shouted from the doorway, oblivious. Come on, Dylan, Vivian, time to pray. My head was spinning. Vivian smoothed her dress, not a hair out of place. She looked at me, her eyes dead. Fix your face, she whispered, and you will come out there. She grabbed my other hand, the one not pressed to my throbbing cheek, and pulled me stumbling through the swinging door into the dining room. The light was blinding. The laughter stopped for a second as we entered. 20 faces turned toward us. My father, Mark Lane, stood by his chair, looking anxious. My grandfather, Walter, was already seated at the head of the table, a position he never relinquished. He was a mountain of a man, even in his late 70s, his face a roadmap of hard decisions and iron will. Ah, there they are, my father said, with false, booming cheer. Let's give thanks. The family began to link hands, a chain of tradition and obligation. I found myself slotted between my father and Vivian. Vivian seized my left hand, her grip painfully tight, her nails digging in again as a reminder. She leaned in, her lips brushing my ear, the ear that was still ringing from her blow. You say one word about that email, she breathed. her voice a promise of utter destruction. One single word, and I will spend every dollar I have to make the entire country know you are a pathetic, gold-digging traitor. I will ruin that little life you have in Savannah. I will make sure you are fired. I will tell them you are unstable, that you are trying to extort your own father after everything he has done for you. Do you understand me, Dylan? I couldn't speak. I just nodded, the movement sending a fresh wave of pain through my jaw. Good. Now bow your head and pray. I squeezed my eyes shut, the hot tears finally breaking free, trailing down my smarting cheek. Dear Lord, my father began, his voice smooth and practiced, we gather here today, blessed in bounty and in family. I was trapped. I felt my father's hand find mine. It was damp and hesitant. He squeezed, and I knew. I just knew. He had seen me enter. He had seen the bright red handprint already forming on my face, and he had chosen, as he always did, to look away, to close his eyes and pretend. Across the table, I heard a quiet snicker. I cracked one eye open. My step-siblings, Avery and Logan, were looking right at me. They weren't praying. They were staring at my face, their expressions identical masks of smug contempt. They had seen it, too, and they were enjoying it. The shame was so thick I thought I would choke on it. I was nothing here. I was the family punching bag, the designated loser, the ghost they could strike without consequence. My father's prayer droned on. For the legacy Walter has built, and for the future we share. I couldn't breathe. I needed to see something real. I lifted my head, just slightly, my gaze traveling down the long table. Mark. Eyes closed. Avery. Eyes closed, hiding a smirk. Logan. Eyes closed. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins, all closed, all bowing, all participating in the lie of the perfect family. And then, my eyes reached the head of the table. Walter Lane was not praying. My grandfather's eyes were wide open. They were not looking at the ceiling or at his plate. They were locked directly, unequivocally, on me. His gaze was sharp, like an eagle's, and it was focused entirely on the swollen crimson mark on my cheek. He did not look shocked. He did not look angry. He looked assessing. His eyes, old and shrewd, seemed to be processing a complex equation, pulling together threads I did not know existed. It was the most terrifying and intense gaze I had ever received. I shuddered, a cold chill running up my spine that had nothing to do with the drafty old house. It was the sudden, awful realization that he had not just seen the result of the slap. In that one, unblinking moment, I felt as if he had seen everything. Every holiday I was excluded, every whispered insult from Vivian, every time my father chose his new wife over his only child. He saw the entire decade of my exile, crystallized in the handprint on my face. My father's voice concluded, Amen. A chorus of amens echoed, napkins rustled, chairs scraped. The performance was over. The feast could begin. Vivian dropped my hand as if it were contaminated. But Walter Lane did not move. He did not reach for his wineglass. He did not pick up the carving knife. He just continued to look at me, the entire table falling silent under his sustained gaze. Vivian froze, a serving spoon halfway to the mashed potatoes. My grandfather raised one hand, index finger slightly extended, and motioned toward me. His voice, when it came, was gravelly, carrying the authority of the man who had built all of this from nothing. Dylan. I flinched. After dinner, he said, his voice quiet but echoing in the sudden silence. You will stay. I need to speak with you privately, in my study. The turkey sat untouched on my plate. My cheek throbbed with a dull rising heat, a metronome marking the time until I had to face my grandfather, the slap. It was a physical thing, a ringing in my ear, a copper taste in my mouth, but the real injury was the echo it produced, the way it ripped open the past I had so carefully sealed away. Vivian's touch was violence. My mother's touch was the smell of cinnamon toast and hospital-grade soap. Before Vivian, there was Elena, My mother was a nurse, practical and warm, with strong hands that could reset a bone or braid my hair with equal, gentle precision. We lived in a small, rented house that always smelled like whatever she was baking, usually lemon bars or simple bread. She was not Elaine. She was not ambitious or strategic. She was kind. Kindness is never weakness. Dylan, she would tell me, wiping flour off my nose. I must have been 12, maybe 13, in those last good years. It's the strongest thing you have. It's the one thing they can't take from you unless you give it away. Don't let anyone bully it out of you. Then, a rainy Tuesday in October, a minor traffic accident, a fender bender. My father had called it when he picked me up from school, his voice tight. But she had hit her head, at the hospital, the one where she worked. We waited and waited. The air smelled of bleach and old coffee. I watched the clock tick. My father kept pacing, asking the desk nurses, "Why is the scan taking so long? She's an employee." They said there were complications. They said the machine was booked. They said they were processing. She died 5 hours later from a brain bleed that a quicker scan might have caught. It was my first, visceral understanding of injustice. It was not a grand, dramatic evil, but a slow, bureaucratic indifference. A minor accident, a slow response, a life erased. I didn't know who to be angry at. The other driver, the hospital, God. So I was angry at the silence she left behind. My father, Mark Lane, does not function well in silence. He is a man who needs a reflective surface. Grief made him look weak, and he could not stand that. So, less than a year later, the silence was filled. Vivian entered not as a comfort, but as a correction. She came from an old, respectable family with new, liquid money. She was a strategic merger. Lane Foundry and Steel was struggling, and Vivian's family provided a massive capital infusion that saved the company and expanded its reach. In exchange, my father gave her everything. He gave her his name, his future, and most crucially, control over his past. The small house was sold. We moved into a sprawling, sterile new build in a gated community, and I, the last living piece of his sentimental, messy past, was moved to the attic. It was not a cozy, finished room. It was the attic. It was cold, drafty, and separated from the main living area by a narrow, steep staircase. My teenage years were spent listening to the muffled sounds of a new family being built 2 floors below me. The dinners were the worst. In the beginning, I would come downstairs, and there would be an oversight. "Oh, Dylan, honey," Vivian would say, her hand fluttering to her throat, a picture of distressed innocence. "I'm so sorry. I completely forgot to have the housekeeper set a place for you. We thought you were eating at your tutoring session." I had no tutors. "That's okay," I would mumble, backing away. "I'm not hungry." "Nonsense. Avery, Logan, make some room." But Avery and Logan, her perfect children, would be busy discussing their polo lessons or their debate team trips. I would be squeezed onto the end, without silverware, a ghost at their table. After a few months of this, I stopped coming down. It was easier to eat a granola bar in the attic and pretend I was at a tutoring session. Vivian never hit me as a child. She was too smart for that. Her abuse was quieter, a constant drip of acid designed to dissolve my worth. It was the way she looked at my clothes. "Another flannel shirt. Dylan? It's rustic. Your mother had very simple tastes, didn't she?" It was the way she discussed my grades. "A 92 in English. That's wonderful, dear. Avery and Logan are, of course, on the Yale track. But you are trying so hard, and that's what matters." It was the way she spoke of my mother. Elena was a lovely woman, I'm sure, but she just didn't understand our world. She wasn't prepared for the pressures of the Lane family. I reacted as any cornered animal would. I made myself small. I became quiet. I read books. I studied, and I plotted my escape. Avery and Logan, meanwhile, floated on a cloud of privilege. They had private schools, European summer trips, and new cars on their 16th birthdays. They were groomed to take over the world. I was groomed to stay out of the picture. At 15, I got a job at a coffee shop. The smell of burnt espresso and steaming milk was my sanctuary. I worked every weekend. Every evening I could, saving every tip in a shoebox under my attic mattress. That money wasn't for clothes or concerts. It was for a bus ticket. It was for an application fee. It was for a different life. During this time, my grandfather, Walter Lane, was a figure of mythic proportions. He was a monolith, the founder, the patriarch. He lived at the Virginia farm, but he was always traveling, inspecting his factories, meeting with foreign investors. He appeared at Thanksgiving and Christmas, said Grace, and carved the turkey with a terrifying precision. He never, ever spoke to me. He rarely even looked at me. His gaze would slide over me as if I were a badly placed piece of furniture. I assumed I was a profound disappointment, the scruffy, unremarkable offspring of his son's first, foolish marriage. He was, I thought, the coldest of all of them. Then came the night I overheard the argument. I was 17, clearing plates after a large family dinner party. It was my default role, the unpaid help. I was carrying a stack of dessert plates toward the kitchen when I heard their voices from the study, Vivian and Walter. "It is a non-negotiable," Walter's deep voice rumbled. "The foundation will establish a scholarship fund for nursing students at the city hospital. It will be called the Elena Carroll Fund." I froze, my hand on the kitchen door. Vivian's reply was sharp, precise, like ice cubes clicking in a glass. "Walter, I absolutely forbid it. It is a terrible business decision. We are building the Lane family brand. We look forward, not backward. Mark has moved on. The company has moved on. We cannot have our philanthropic efforts tied to a sentimental past. It's messy. It should be buried." My heart pounded. I waited. I prayed. I willed my father, who I knew was in that room, to say something, to defend his late wife, to defend my mother. The silence stretched. I heard the clink of a glass being set on a wooden desk. My father said nothing. "It is buried, then," Vivian said, her voice full of triumphant finality. I did not break any plates. I quietly walked into the kitchen, set them down, went up the back stairs to the attic, and packed a small bag. I left the next morning. I told them I was visiting a friend for the weekend. I never came back. I took my shoebox of money, got on a bus to Savannah, and did not look back. I worked 2 jobs, a barista from 5 in the morning and a dishwasher at night, while putting myself through culinary school. I graduated, not with the pedigree of Yale, but with the practical skill of making something beautiful out of heat and sugar. My talent, it turned out, was for pastry. My precision, my quiet focus, my ability to work for 14 hours straight made me valuable in a professional kitchen. I got the job at the hotel. I got my own small apartment. I bought a cat. I was poor. I was tired. But I was free. I had built a life that Vivian could not touch. The Thanksgiving invitation arrived every November, on its thick, cream-colored cardstock, a summons to a life I had divorced. I always declined. "The hotel is so busy for the holidays," I'd write in a polite, detached email. "I can't get away." But this year was different. 2 weeks ago, just as I was typing that same email, my phone rang. A private number. I almost didn't answer. "Hello?" "Dylan." The voice was gravel. It was iron. It was my grandfather. "You will come to the farm for Thanksgiving." It was not a request. It was a command. "Grandfather," I started, my old anxieties rushing back. "I'm not sure I can. Work is—" "I have something," he interrupted, and his voice sounded different. It was thin, tired. "Something I need to pass on to you." There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing. "It's important," he said, and hung up. So I came. I used my only vacation days. I sat on a bus for 9 hours. Not for my father, and certainly not for Vivian. I came because the one man I thought was colder than a steel beam had reached into my life for the first time, and he had sounded strange. Now, sitting at this table, the sound of silverware scraping against porcelain, the taste of blood in my mouth. I tried to make sense of it, and a memory, small and sharp, surfaced. It was from that same party, the night I heard the argument about the scholarship. Before the argument, I had been clearing the main course, moving quietly between the laughing, wealthy guests. I was invisible. I reached for my grandfather's plate. He was staring into the fireplace, lost in thought. As I leaned over, my hand brushing past his shoulder, his head turned. Our eyes met by accident. He saw me, the daughter of the first wife, the attic dweller, serving tables at his party. He saw my father laughing across the room, ignoring me. He saw Vivian, holding court, the queen. In that one, unguarded second, I did not see the cold patriarch. I saw a flash of something that looked like profound, agonizing guilt. He had looked away instantly, his iron mask slamming back down. I had convinced myself I'd imagined it, a trick of the firelight. But as I sat at the Thanksgiving table, his command to stay echoing in the dining room, I knew I had not imagined it. He had seen me. He had been watching all along, and whatever he had to say to me, whatever he had to pass on, was waiting for me in his study, on the other side of this endless, terrible meal. The meal was a masterpiece of denial. We passed the gravy, the stuffing, the candied yams, all while the bright red print of Vivian's hand cooled on my face. Avery and Logan talked loudly about their upcoming ski trip to Aspen. My father, Mark, dissected the football game with an uncle, his voice artificially hearty. Vivian, a consummate performer, laughed elegantly, her eyes never once meeting mine, as if striking me had been as trivial as swatting a fly. I moved food around my plate, a silent, vibrating tuning fork of humiliation and rage, just waiting for the command. When the last sliver of pie was served, the family pushed back their chairs, a collective sigh of overindulgence. "Let's move to the parlor," Vivian announced, standing and smoothing her cashmere. "Coffee and cognac." It was the signal for the group to migrate to the grand living room, a space with a 20-foot ceiling and a fireplace I could stand in, to continue their performance of a happy, wealthy family. As I stood, my legs stiff, intending to retreat to the kitchen and find the bus schedule, Walter's voice cut through the chatter. "Not you, Dylan." He had already pushed himself up from the head of the table, his large frame moving with a slow, deliberate effort. "The parlor is for chatter," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear, and therefore to disapprove. "The library is for conversation. Follow me." He didn't wait for a reply. He simply turned and walked toward the grand staircase. The room went silent. I felt Vivian's gaze on me, a physical, burning weight, far more painful than the slap. I looked at my father, who was staring intently at the dregs of his wineglass, refusing to be part of this. I had no choice. I followed my grandfather. The library was on the second floor, in the old wing of the house. It was a room I had never been allowed to enter. It was his sanctuary, and no one, not even Vivian, dared disturb him there. He pushed the heavy oak door open with a groan of old hinges, and I stepped into a world that smelled of old paper, leather, and pipe tobacco. It was not a room for show. The walls were covered, floor to ceiling, with dark wooden shelves groaning under the weight of books, not just leather-bound sets, but worn paperbacks, modern business texts, and thick engineering manuals, blueprints for the original Lane foundry and steel. The lines, faded but distinct, were framed on one wall. In the corner sat a massive, old-fashioned black safe with a brass combination dial. He gestured to a worn, cracked leather chair opposite his desk and sat in the matching one behind it. The desk was a battlefield of paper, organized into precarious stacks. My eyes scanned the room, looking for anything familiar, and then they landed on the mantelpiece above the small, unlit fireplace. Among the framed photos of factory openings and handshakes with politicians, there was one small, black-and-white picture. I stood up and walked toward it, my hand instinctively rising to my cheek, which felt swollen and huge. It was me. I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, with gap teeth and pigtails, standing in a field of wildflowers. My arm was around the waist of a smiling young woman with kind, tired eyes. My mother, Elena? I had no memory of this photograph. I did not own a single picture of the two of us together. Vivian had made sure any clutter from my father's previous life had been archived, which meant it had vanished. She was a good woman, Walter said, his voice quiet. I turned around. He was not looking at the photo. He was looking at my face. He pointed a thick, steady finger at my cheek. Vivian did that. It was a statement, not a question. I did what I had been trained to do my entire life. I deflected. I lied. No. I tripped in the kitchen. I ran into a cabinet door. It's nothing. Walter Lane stared at me, his gaze unblinking. Heavy. He did not call me a liar. He did not have to. His silence was an anvil. He had seen it. He had seen it the moment I walked into the dining room. He had waited and watched me lie about it. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, the old leather sighing. The cabinet, he repeated, with a deep, weary irony. He looked down at his own hands, calloused and strong, clasped on the desk. I need to apologize. Dylan. I was so startled. I took a step back. Elaine never apologized. I have allowed this to go on for too long, he said, gesturing vaguely at the house, at the air, at the family downstairs. I have allowed my family to become something not worthy of the goodness you inherited from your mother. I didn't know what to say. Grandfather, Be quiet and let me finish. I am an old man, and I do not have time for pleasantries. For many years, I was blinded. I built an empire, and I needed someone to run the house, to run my son. Vivian came in. She was efficient. She was strategic. She presented me with beautiful financial reports. She told me charming, clever stories about the family, about the charity, about how well Avery and Logan were doing, about how you were adjusting to your new life. He spat the word adjusting as if it tasted foul. I let myself be blinded by the good news, he said, because it was easier than looking at the truth. The truth was that my son is a coward, and his wife is a predator. He looked at me, his eyes sharp again. Now, tell me about Savannah. Tell me what you actually do, not the story Vivian tells me about you finding yourself at a hotel. It was the strangest, most direct conversation I had ever had with him. So I told him. I spoke about the hotel kitchen, the long, grueling hours. I told him about the rush of a Saturday night service, the heat of the ovens, the camaraderie with the other cooks. I described the lemon thyme tart with a pine nut crust I had been perfecting, and the way the head chef had finally put it on the dessert menu. I told him about the double shifts I worked to cover my rent, and the one night a week I volunteered at the local soup kitchen, because my mother had. He listened. He actually listened. He didn't check his phone. He didn't interrupt. He listened with an intensity my own father had never once shown me. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. You built something real, he said, a note of respect in his voice. From nothing, like I did. The rest of them, they are just beneficiaries. They consume, you create. He reached into a drawer in his heavy desk and pulled out a thick manila envelope, sealed with a clasp. He slid it across the polished wood. You saw something today, he said. In the sunroom, on the laptop. My blood ran cold. I don't know what you mean. Stop lying, Dylan. It is insulting to my intelligence, and it is beneath yours. You saw the email about the Hope Horizons initiative. I nodded, my throat tight. Open the envelope. My hands were shaking. I fumbled with the clasp and pulled out a stack of paper. It was not one email. It was dozens. Printed out bank statements, wire transfer confirmations, all from the Lane Family Foundation, specifically the Hope Horizons Fund. I saw the transfer I had glimpsed, $150,000. Then I saw another, from 2 months prior, for $100,000, and another, all going to the same numbered account in the Cayman Islands, under a shell company I had never heard of. Pinnacle Crest Imports. Vivian has been very busy, Walter said, his voice a low growl. She has been siphoning money from the charity fund for 3 years, moving it offshore. Pinnacle Crest Imports. A marvelous name, is it not? It is owned, on paper, by her younger brother. I looked up, stunned. You knew this? I have suspected for 6 months. My personal accountants started finding discrepancies, blank spots where there should have been reports. The laptop, I whispered, the pieces clicking into place. You left that email open for me to find. I did not leave it, he corrected, but I made sure the circumstances were right for you to find it. Yes, I had to know. I had to see what you would do. If you would keep quiet, like your father, if you would try to use it to blackmail her, like Avery or Logan might, or what? Or if you would be your mother's daughter. You did not use it. You did not run. You confronted her. You took the blow, and you did not, even then, expose her at the dinner table. You have character. Dylan. He leaned forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the desk. Your father, he said, is a weak man. I love him. But he is a disappointment. If I give him this information, he will panic. He will choose his wife. He will choose the path of least resistance. He will do nothing, just as he did when she pushed to have Elena's memory erased. My heart ached at the mention of the scholarship. He knew. But you, Walter continued, his gaze pinning me, you are not weak, and you are the only person in this God-forsaken family who has not sold their soul for a percentage point. You are the only one I can trust. Trust with what? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Vivian is making a move. She is convincing the board of directors that I am senile, that my honorary chairmanship is a liability. She wants to consolidate her power, take full control of the foundation, which she has been using as her personal piggy bank. She wants me gone. What do you want me to do? I need your help, he said. I need you to get more. These emails are the start. I need the internal ledgers, the fake charity contracts she signs to justify the transfers, the real bookkeeping. My accountants cannot get in. But you are family. You are the invisible girl. You can move through this house. You can access that office. They underestimate you, and that is your greatest weapon. I stared at him, the papers heavy in my hand. This was insane. He was asking me to be a spy, to risk everything. No, I said, pushing the envelope back. Absolutely not. I am not like you. I am not like her. I am a cook. I live in Savannah. I want nothing to do with this. I just want to go home, to my real life, a life where people don't hit each other over money. I stood up, ready to walk out. If I die, he said, his voice stopping me cold. If I die, and Vivian wins, everything Elena ever stood for, her kindness, her decency, her memory, will be buried forever. She will have won. She will have erased your mother. Is that the peaceful life you want to go back to? The one where you let them win? I froze, my back to him. He had just aimed his words at the deepest, most wounded part of my soul. He had taken my mother's memory and made it a weapon, or a shield. I wasn't sure which. I was torn, vibrating with indecision and old grief, when a new voice, light and sickly sweet, cut through the tension. Am I interrupting? We both turned. Vivian was standing in the doorway. Her perfectly made-up face was arranged in a mask of polite concern. She was holding a small, exquisite porcelain plate with a single slice of pecan pie. She had not knocked. The door had been open a crack, and she had glided in, a shark in cashmere. How long had she been listening? Walter, darling, she cooed, walking into the room. You have been monopolizing Dylan. I thought you might like some dessert. Dylan, I saved this for you. I know it's your favorite. Her eyes, a cold, pale blue, flickered over the desk, noting the open envelope, the stacks of paper, my white-knuckled grip on the chair. She had heard enough. She had heard charity, or responsibility, or mother. She placed the plate on the corner of Walter's desk with a delicate, deliberate click. Her smile was bright, professional, terrifying. "It is so wonderful to have you here. Dylan, truly. It makes the family feel complete." She turned to leave, pausing in the doorway. She looked back at me, her smile still in place, but her eyes as cold and dead as the old safe in the corner. "In this house," she said, her voice a casual, airy whisper, "people who do not know how to keep secrets, they don't tend to stay very long." She pulled the heavy door, and it shut with a quiet, final latch, leaving me and my grandfather in the silence. The game board officially, and terrifyingly, set. I returned to Savannah on a bus. The manila envelope a lead weight in my backpack. The drive back was a 9-hour blur. The flat, monotonous landscape of the I-95 corridor doing nothing to calm the adrenaline storm raging inside me. My cheek was a mottled, yellowish purple, a physical reminder of what was now at stake. Vivian's parting threat echoed in my head, a counterpoint to my grandfather's gravelly request. "I need your help." I walked into my hotel kitchen, and the world I had built for myself, the one that had always felt so real and solid, suddenly seemed fragile, like a set piece. The smells of thyme, butter, and industrial sanitizer were the same. The clatter of pans and the hiss of the fryers were the same, but I was different. "Dylan, you're back," my head chef, a stern woman named Anya, said without looking up from butchering a fish. "Did you finally get that rich family of yours to pay your bills?" It was an old kitchen joke, that I was some kind of secret heiress. "Something like that," I mumbled. I tried to lose myself in the work. I tried to focus on the precision of a brunoise, the molecular science of a perfect pâte à choux, but my focus was shattered. I would be weighing flour for a batch of bread, and the numbers on the digital scale, 10.5 ounces, would morph into the numbers on Vivian's bank transfers, $100,000. I'd check an invoice for a case of Belgian chocolate, and my mind would drift to shell companies and fraudulent contracts. The kitchen, my sanctuary, now felt like a cage. I was living a double life, and I had only just begun. I had one friend in Savannah I trusted, Maya. She was an internal accountant for the hotel, a quiet, brilliant woman with a mind for numbers that I found both terrifying and awe-inspiring. She could make an Excel spreadsheet sing. While I saw chaos in a stack of invoices, she saw a story. I found her in the cramped, windowless accounting office in the hotel basement, nursing a lukewarm coffee. "Hey, Dylan," she said, not looking up from her monitor. "If you're here to complain about the payroll vendor again, take a number." "I need a favor," I said, my voice low. "A big one, a weird one, and you have to promise you will never, ever mention it to anyone." That made her look up. She took off her glasses, her eyes sharp. "You look terrible. Is that a bruise?" I waved it off. "It's a long story. Look, it's family stuff, but it's about finances. You're the smartest person I know with this." I handed her the copies of the bank statements Walter had given me. I didn't give her the context. Not really. I just said, "My grandfather thinks his foundation is being mismanaged. He asked me to look, but this is a foreign language to me." Maya put her glasses back on and fanned the pages out on her desk. She was silent for 5 minutes, then 10. The only sound was the click of her pen as she tapped a few lines. "Well," she said finally, "whoever is mismanaging this is either very stupid or thinks everyone else is." "What do you mean?" She pulled a blank legal pad over. "Look at this. March 12th. A wire for $50,000 to Global Outreach Partners. Got it?" I nodded. "Okay, now look at this. From the exact same day. March 12th. A wire for $50,000 to Children's World Fund. And look here. April 3rd. $75,000 to West Virginia Literacy Project. And, yep, same day. April 3rd. $75,000 to Appalachian Reading Initiative." She drew lines connecting the dates. "See the pattern? Same day, same exact dollar amount, Same general description, but different recipient. So, they're charitable. They give money to lots of people. No, Dylan, she tapped the paper. This isn't charity. This is a classic shell game. You don't have two identical, major expenditures on the same day for the same purpose to different entities. It's not efficient. It's redundant. It's what you do when you want to move $100,000 but need it to look like you're only spending $50,000. You double the entries. One of these is probably real. The other, she tapped the paper, is going to a different bank account entirely, probably the same one, just with a different name on the front. I felt a cold dread. And all these transfers, they're coded as unrestricted educational grants. That's the description. My mind flashed back to the email I had seen, the Hope Horizons Initiative. Can you look up a name for me? I typed the name into her computer. The Hope Horizons Initiative, the Lane Family Foundation website, which Vivian controlled, called it a key strategic partner in their global mission. Maya and I clicked the link. It led to a website that looked like it had been built in 1998. It was a single, static page. There was a stock photo of smiling, diverse children running in a field of grass. There was a block of text, filled with vague buzzwords. Empowering futures. Strategic solutions. A global commitment to change. There was no About Us page. There were no staff bios. There was no physical address. There was no list of projects. There was just a Contact Us button that led to a generic web form. This isn't a charity, Maya said, her voice flat. This is a digital business card. It's a ghost. It's a shell. I went back to the printouts. Vivian's, my stepmother's report, said they funded a new computer lab for a community center in Richmond, the East Richmond Youth Center. It's listed right here, a $50,000 grant. I picked up my phone, right there, in Maya's office. My heart was hammering so hard I thought she could hear it. I Googled the center, a real number, a real address. I dialed. East Richmond Youth Center. This is Charisse. Hi, I said, my voice shaking. My name is Dylan Carroll. I'm calling on behalf of a private family fund. We're doing research on local giving, and I saw on the Lane Foundation website that they funded a new computer lab for you last spring. There was a long, tired sigh from the other end. Oh, them. Yeah, we saw that, too. Mrs. Lane came by, took some pictures with our kids, promised us the world. The kids were so excited. So the lab is... The lab, Charisse said, her voice bitter, is the same 3 busted-ass computers we've had since 2010. We never received a dime, not one. When we called her office to follow up, they said the funds had been reallocated to a more urgent international need. But she sure as hell used the pictures of our kids in her Christmas newsletter. I hung up the phone. I looked at Maya. Her face was grim. It's worse than I thought, I whispered. She's not just stealing. She's stealing from them, from kids, and using their faces to cover her tracks. That night, I opened a new, encrypted email account. I typed up everything. Maya's analysis of the double entries, the link to the ghost website, the name and testimony of Charisse at the youth center. I detailed the fraud. I sent it to the secure email address Walter had given me. The reply came 3 hours later. It was just 2 sentences. Good work. This will be important in the coming months. The coming months? It felt like a lifetime. I went back to work. I baked bread. I plated desserts. And I watched. Vivian, as if she knew she was being watched, went on the offensive. A new article appeared in a glossy Richmond magazine. The Charitable Heart of the Lane Family. It was a fawning, 3-page profile on Vivian, with photos of her, my father, Avery, and Logan. They were ladling soup at a shelter, one I now suspected received no actual money, and hugging children, the same ones from the youth center. She was quoted extensively about the sacred responsibility of wealth and the burden of philanthropy. I had to put the magazine down before I threw it across the room. Then, 2 weeks later, an email landed in my personal inbox. It was not from Walter. It was from a corporate headhunter. The subject line read, Confidential inquiry, executive pastry chef position, Elena Kitchen Collective. I stared at the name. Elena, my mother's name. It couldn't be a coincidence. The email was formal, inviting me to an interview for a newly formed, high-end artisanal food brand. The salary listed was almost triple what I was making. It was a life-changing number. At the very bottom, below the headhunter's signature, was a single, italicized line, like a postscript. A mutual acquaintance, Mr. W. Lane, suggested we reach out. Please come on his behalf. I booked another bus ticket. The interview was not at a high-end office. It was in a small, rented room above a dentist's office in a nondescript suburb of D.C. It was beige, with bad fluorescent lighting and a sad plastic plant in the corner. When I walked in, there was no headhunter. There was just Walter Lane, sitting at a folding table. Next to him sat a man I recognized from the periphery of past Thanksgivings, Mr. Harlan, the Lane family's tight-lipped corporate lawyer, the man who always sat in the corner, observed everything, and said nothing. "Dylan," Walter said, not bothering to stand. "Thank you for coming. This is Mr. Harlan." Harlan nodded, his eyes as blank as a ledger. "What is this?" I asked, gesturing at the sad office. "What is the Elena Kitchen Collective?" "It is a legal entity," Harlan said, his voice dry and precise, like rustling paper. "Incorporated 3 months ago in the state of Delaware. It is currently a shell, designed to hold certain assets." Walter looked at me. "My assets. I have been quietly moving a significant portion of my personal wealth, the parts not tied up in the foundry or the official foundation, out of Vivian's reach. I have put them into this collective." "You named it after my mother," I said, my voice thick. "I did," Walter said. "A name she would not recognize, a name she would not think to look for, and," he added, a flicker of something new in his eyes, "a way to test you, to see if you were just a baker, or if you had the instincts to run something." "Run something?" "The Elena Kitchen Collective is your inheritance, Dylan. If you prove you can handle this." Harlan slid a small, silver object across the folding table, a USB flash drive. "What's that?" I asked. "That," Walter said, his voice dropping, "is the truth. That is what my accountants could not get. That is a full backup of the Lane Foundation's internal accounting server, from inception to 48 hours ago." "How?" "I have one employee left at the foundation who is loyal to me, not to her," Walter said. "An older woman in the records department. She has watched what Vivian has done for years. She was fond of your mother. She copied everything. The real books, Dylan, not the curated reports Vivian shows the board, the deleted emails, the original wire instructions, the contracts for the fake charities." Harlan spoke again. "It is enough, if properly vetted, to not only remove Mrs. Lane from the board, but to trigger a state and federal investigation. We are talking about wire fraud, tax evasion, embezzlement, potential criminal charges." I stared at the small silver drive. It looked so insignificant, but it was a bomb. I understood, in that cold, beige room, the true weight of what he was asking. This was no longer about a slap, or a mean-spirited argument, or even a stolen scholarship. This was an empire, a billion-dollar war, and he was handing me, a 28-year-old prep cook, the trigger. "If I take this," I said, my hand hovering over the drive, "what happens to me? When she finds out, she will destroy me. She'll say I'm a gold digger. She'll say I'm faking all of this to get the inheritance. She'll paint me as the villain." "She will," Walter agreed, his face hard. "She will use every weapon she has. She will try to ruin you. This is not a clean fight." "And if I do nothing?" I asked. "If I walk out of here, go back to Savannah, and pretend this never happened?" "Then she wins," Walter said simply. "She buries your mother for a second time. She continues to steal from children, and she eventually takes over the entire Lane legacy, turning it into a monument to her own greed. The choice is yours." I looked at the drive. I thought of the slap. I thought of Charisse at the youth center. I thought of my mother's picture on his mantle. Was I doing this for justice? Was I doing this for revenge? Or was I just a pawn? A tool my grandfather was using to fight a war with his daughter-in-law? Was I saving my mother's memory? Or was I about to be crushed in a battle of billionaires that I was not equipped to fight? My fingers, calloused from knives and hot pans, closed around the cool metal of the USB drive. I slipped it into my pocket. The USB drive felt like a small, cold stone in my pocket, weighing me down, pulling me under. I went back to Savannah, back to my tiny apartment, and hid the drive in a box of old tea tins. For 3 days, I did nothing. I called out sick from the hotel. I sat on my floor, in the dark, just thinking. I was a prep cook. I knew how to roast bones, clarify butter, and plate a dessert. I was not a corporate spy. I was not a warrior. I was the girl from the attic. But Walter had been right about one thing. They underestimated me. They saw the apron, the cheap shoes, the quiet demeanor, and they dismissed me. They never imagined the girl who served the coffee would be the one to burn the whole house down. I hadn't decided what to do, or how to do it. I was still frozen, caught between my old life of quiet survival and the new, terrifying path Walter had laid out. Vivian decided for me. It started not with a cannonball, but with a sniper's bullet. Maya was the one who saw it. She sent me a text at 6 a.m. "Don't panic, but you need to see this." She sent a link to a niche but respected financial blog, one that specialized in high society gossip and corporate intrigue. The headline was devastating. Tensions at Lane Foundry, an internal family feud over philanthropy? My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. The article was short, anonymous, and perfectly crafted. It didn't mention my name, not at first. It spoke of a disgruntled family member, a distant granddaughter from a previous, less fortunate marriage, who had recently reappeared. It quoted a source close to the family. I could almost hear Vivian's cold, precise voice dictating the words. This individual, who has lived an estranged life in Georgia, has recently expressed jealousy over the lifestyle of her successful step-siblings, the source claimed. She has made several bizarre, unsubstantiated claims regarding the management of the Lane Family Foundation, a model of philanthropic integrity in Virginia. The article didn't accuse me of anything directly. It was all insinuation. It hinted that I was unstable, that my sudden interest in the family was financially motivated, and that I was attempting to use baseless accusations as leverage to renegotiate her standing. It was a masterpiece of preemptive warfare. She was painting me as a gold-digging, unhinged liar before I had even made a move. Within an hour, the dam broke. The blog post was picked up by larger, less scrupulous gossip sites, and then it hit social media. My step-siblings, Avery and Logan, must have been waiting for the signal. They posted, almost simultaneously. They didn't link the article. They just spoke from the heart. Logan, on Twitter, "So sick of hearing about fake family members who only show up when they want something. Some people will do anything for a piece of the pie. Disgusting. Loyalty blessed." Avery, on Instagram, she posted a stunning, professionally lit photo of her, Logan, Vivian, and my father, all of them laughing, arms around each other at some gala. Her caption was pure, "Saccharine poison. My family, my rocks, through everything, we protect each other. So grateful for my amazing, generous mother, at Vivian Lane, who gives so much to the world, even when faced with unimaginable betrayal from those she tried to help. Family first grateful." The comments were a flood of sympathetic, angry voices. "Stay strong. Avery, we know the truth. Whoever she is, she's garbage. A gold digger from Savannah. I heard." And then, the photo I knew was coming, a gossip site, one with millions of followers, found it. It was an old Thanksgiving photo, from years ago, one of the last I'd attended before I left. The caterers had insisted I be in one picture. In it, the family, Walter, Mark, Vivian, Avery, Logan, is clustered in the center, all in expensive, color-coordinated shades of cream and beige, smiling for the camera. And there I am, off to the side. I am 15 years old, in my cheap, ill-fitting black dress from the thrift store. I am not smiling. I am looking at them. My expression one of palpable, awkward exclusion. The gossip site posted it with a red circle drawn around my face. The caption, "The Outsider. This is Dylan Carroll, the estranged granddaughter at the center of the Lane family feud. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Lane family Dylan, Carroll, gall digger." My name, my face, everywhere. I threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor. I sank to my knees, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. My quiet, anonymous life in Savannah, my job, my friends. She had taken a bomb to it in less than 3 hours. I found the phone. The screen was cracked. I dialed Walter's number. He picked up on the first ring. "They're destroying me," I choked out, the words barely audible. "It's everywhere. The articles, Instagram, my picture." "I've seen it." His voice was calm, a solid block of granite in my hurricane. "You've seen it? That's it? You have to do something. You have to tell them it's a lie." "And what would I tell them, Dylan?" he asked, his voice still level. "That it is true? That you are working with me to investigate her? That would be a declaration of war we are not ready to fight." "So what do I do? I'm all over the internet as a gold digger." "You do nothing," he said, his voice firm. "This is a good sign." "A good sign? How is this a good sign?" "Because she is terrified," Walter said. "Your visit, your questions, her knowing that I am on to her. This is not a strategic move. This is a panic move. She is firing into the dark. She is showing her entire hand. You will not respond. You will not post. You will not talk to a single reporter. You will let her scream into the void. She has built her entire identity on being a perfect, calm, generous philanthropist. Let the world watch her have a very public, very ugly meltdown. The truth is on our side. The data is on our side. Let her have the headlines. We are working on the evidence." I wanted to scream, but his cold logic cut through the panic. He was right. This was her battlefield. Public opinion, social media, appearances. My battlefield was the USB drive, hidden in the tea tin. "Now," he said, "go dark and get to work. I need to know what is on that drive." I took a deep breath. Okay, I won't respond. But Vivian's offensive was just beginning. That night, she escalated. She appeared on the local Richmond Evening News for an exclusive sit-down interview. I watched it on my laptop, my stomach in knots. The set was soft, intimate. Vivian was in a pale blue sweater, her makeup minimal. She looked vulnerable. She looked like a victim. "Vivian," the reporter said, her voice dripping with sympathy, "you have been a pillar of this community. These allegations about the foundation, from within your own family. It must be devastating." Vivian's eyes welled with tears. She was a magnificent actress. She dabbed at her eye with a tissue. "Clara," she said, her voice breaking just right. It's a pain I wouldn't wish on anyone. The foundation is my life's work. To have it slandered, it's one thing, but to have it come from Dylan." She let my name hang in the air, a sin. "She is my husband's daughter," Vivian continued, her voice strengthening with false bravery. "I have loved her. I have tried, for 10 years, to bring her into this family, but she has always carried a deep anger, a jealousy. I suppose I can understand it, but to twist our charitable work, to accuse me of this." She couldn't even say the word stealing. She didn't have to. And then, the master stroke. The camera panned slightly. My father, Mark, was sitting just beside her, just off camera. He wasn't in the main shot, but he was there. The reporter turned to him. Mark, this must be tearing your family apart. My father, who had closed his eyes at the Thanksgiving table, now stared blankly at the reporter. He looked exhausted. He looked broken. He just nodded. He reached out and placed his hand on Vivian's, squeezing it. He said nothing. But his silence was his answer. His silence was a roar. He was with her. He was standing by the woman who had just publicly, on television, branded his own daughter a jealous, vindictive liar. I turned off the laptop. I felt nothing. It was a cold, empty void. The part of me that had been waiting, for 28 years, for my father to finally stand up for me, just died. It simply went quiet. The next day, the real-world consequences arrived. Dylan, my head chef, Anya, said, pulling me into her tiny, cramped office. She looked uncomfortable. I've been getting calls. I know. I'm sorry. It's reporters from Richmond, from New York gossip columns. They're asking about your employment history. They're asking if you're stable. They're asking if you talk about your family's money. Anya, I swear. I know you. She cut me off, her voice not unkind. You're the best pastry cook I've had in 5 years. You're quiet. You're on time. You work harder than anyone. This isn't you. But the hotel, Dylan, the general manager is freaking out. We've got 2 high-profile weddings this weekend. We cannot have reporters camped out in our lobby. He sees Lane family feud, and he sees a PR nightmare. So I'm fired, I said, my voice flat. You're not fired, she said, though it sounded like a lie. You're on leave, a paid leave, for a few days. Just go home. Dylan, let this blow over. Get your family stuff. Sort it out. And then come back, okay? I just nodded. I took off my apron, the one that smelled like butter and vanilla, and walked out of the hotel. I was cut off. She had done it. In 48 hours, Vivian had isolated me from my work, my friends, and my one source of income. I was truly, completely alone. I walked home, my mind numb. As I fumbled for my keys, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A new text, an unknown number. It wasn't a call. It wasn't a long message. It was one sentence. If you want to know why your mother really died, look at the Lane Corporate Medical Assistance Fund records from that year. I stopped, my key halfway in the lock. What? My mother had died in a minor car accident. She had died because of a slow, overwhelmed hospital. It had nothing to do with Lane Corporate? That was impossible. It was a random, cruel twist of fate. I read the text again. Medical Assistance Fund. My blood turned to ice. I thought of the scholarship fund, the Elena Carroll Fund, the one Vivian had vetoed, had insisted be buried. Had she buried something else, too? I called Walter. I got a text, I said, my voice frantic. An anonymous one. It said, I should look at the company's medical fund from the year my mother died. There was a long silence on his end, longer than usual. Grandfather? That, he said, and for the first time, he sounded hesitant. That is a different front in this war. Dylan, a darker one. I was not prepared to fight that one yet. What does that mean? You know about this? You knew her death wasn't an accident? It was an accident, he said, his voice sharp. The crash was an accident. The aftermath is more complicated. I will explain it to you. But at the right time, not over the phone. Focus on the USB. Focus on the foundation. That is the enemy we can see. He hung up. I was standing in my hallway, my world tilting. My mother's death, the one pure, simple tragedy in my life. And he was telling me it was complicated. My phone buzzed again. I thought it was the anonymous texter. It was an email. From Vivian Lane, subject, let's end this. My finger hovered, shaking. I opened it. There was no Dear Dylan, no preamble. This has gone on long enough. You have made your point. You are a nuisance. You are also, unfortunately, family. You are clearly unhappy with your life in Savannah. I am prepared to help you. A one-time gift from the Lane family to help you start fresh, somewhere new, maybe California. I will wire $600,000 to an account of your choosing. In exchange, you will sign the attached document. It is a standard non-disclosure agreement. It states that you will never again interfere with family business, never again speak to the press about the Lane family, and never again make contact with Walter regarding corporate or foundation matters. You will return to your life, and we will return to ours. You will be free. You have 24 hours to accept. After that, this offer is gone, and I will assume we are no longer interested in a peaceful solution. $600,000. I stared at the number. It was more money than I had ever dreamed of. It was rent for the rest of my life. It was a bakery. It was freedom. It was a clean slate. All I had to do was sign. All I had to do was walk away. I thought about my rent, due next week. I thought about Anya's face, telling me to take a few days. I thought about being fired. Then I thought about the text. Why your mother really died. I thought about Charisse at the youth center. We never received a dime. I thought about my mother, Elena. Kindness is never weakness. I thought about the file, the Elena Carroll Fund, the past that should be buried. Vivian was offering me a payout to bury my mother all over again. I sat at my small, cheap kitchen table. I opened a reply. I typed one sentence. My silence has killed enough dreams. I hit send. The war was no longer in the shadows. It was in the open, and I had just fired my first shot. After I hit send on that email, the silence was louder than any of Vivian's attacks. I had refused $600,000. I had effectively declared war on a woman who had just proven she could, with a few phone calls and a staged television interview, erase my professional life and brand me a public pariah. I spent the next 2 weeks in a state of suspended animation. My paid leave from the hotel was a polite fiction. I knew, and Anya knew, that I could not come back until this was over. One way or another, I lived off my meager savings, poring over the contents of the USB drive. Maya helped me, in secret, after her shifts, her accounting brain slowly, methodically untangling the complex web of shell companies, false invoices, and redirected funds. The scale of it was staggering. It was not just a few $100,000, it was millions, year after year, siphoned off, laundered through art purchases and consulting fees paid to her brother's ghost company. We were building a case, a fortress of undeniable facts. I sent our findings to Harlan and Walter in encrypted files, and the response was always the same. Good. Keep working. Not yet. Then, 3 weeks after I refused Vivian's offer, my phone rang. It was an afternoon. I was staring at a spreadsheet, and the name on the screen was simply Harlan. "Dylan," he said, his voice stripped of all emotion, as was his way. He did not say hello. "You need to come back to Virginia, now." "What? Why? What's happened?" "There was an emergency board of directors meeting this morning. Your grandfather was attempting to make a motion. He collapsed." The floor dropped out from under me. Is he? "He is alive," Harlan said. "A small mercy, but it is severe. A major cardiac event. He's at St. Jude's in Richmond, in the coronary care unit. I am booking your flight. A car will meet you at the airport in 3 hours." The call ended. I was on a plane before the sun went down, the USB drive taped to my stomach, under my shirt. The hospital was a different kind of cold. It was not the biting, emotional chill of the Lane mansion. It was a sterile, chemical, efficient cold, the smell, antiseptic, floor wax, and that faint, sickly sweet odor of illness hit me the second the automatic doors hissed open. I was transported, instantly, back to that rainy October night. I was 13 again, sitting on a hard plastic chair, my feet not quite touching the floor, waiting for a doctor to come out and tell me why the scan was taking so long. I remembered the beep, beep, beep of a monitor from a room down the hall. Now, the same sounds echoed in the pristine, white corridor of the VIP cardiac wing. Beep, 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 the sound of a life being measured, second by second. I found the room. A state trooper, of all things, was posted outside the door. Such was the security for Walter Lane. I gave my name. He nodded, checking a list, and let me pass. I pushed the heavy door open. The room was vast, more like a hotel suite, with a sitting area and a wall of windows overlooking the city, but at its center was a high-tech bed, and in it, my grandfather looked impossibly small. He was a pale, waxy gray, his barrel chest covered by a thin hospital gown, his body tethered to a dozen machines by a web of wires and tubes. And on either side of the bed, like statues guarding a tomb, stood Vivian and my father. They were in mid-conversation with a man in a long white coat, a doctor. Vivian was playing the part she was born for, the devastated, loving wife. Her face was a mask of noble grief, her hand resting protectively on my father's arm. My father, Mark, just looked gray as his father. "Doing everything we can," the doctor was saying, his voice a low, comforting murmur. "He is a fighter, but the next 24 hours are critical." "Whatever it takes, doctor," Vivian said, her voice thick with staged emotion. "Whatever it takes, he is the love of my life." Then she saw me, standing in the doorway. Her face, for 1 millisecond, did not change, but her eyes did. The warmth, the grief, the love, it all vanished. Her eyes became chips of blue ice. She immediately turned to the nurse standing by the monitor. "Nurse, I'm sorry. I thought I was clear. My father-in-law is in critical condition. We need to keep the number of visitors to an absolute minimum. He cannot be agitated, only immediate family." She was dismissing me, in front of the doctor, the nurse, and my own father. She was drawing the line, right there. The nurse, a no-nonsense woman with tired eyes, looked at her clipboard. "It says here, Dylan Carroll, granddaughter, immediate access, per Mr. Harlan." Vivian's jaw tightened. She had been overruled by a lawyer. The doctor cleared his throat, sensing the tension. "I will leave you all. He needs rest." The doctor and nurse filed out. The room was silent, save for the rhythmic, electronic sigh of the ventilator and the steady beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor. My father finally looked at me. He opened his mouth, as if to say something, but Vivian's hand squeezed his arm, and he fell silent. I walked past them, my shoes silent on the linoleum, and stood at the foot of the bed. I just looked at him. The iron-willed patriarch, the man who had built an empire, now reduced to this. I stood there for an hour, then 2. Vivian and Mark eventually retreated to the sitting area, taking hushed, important phone calls. They were already managing the fallout, the stock price, the board. I just watched him breathe. At some point, in the late afternoon, Vivian left to make arrangements at the house. My father, released from her grip, mumbled something about needing coffee and fled. I was alone with him. I pulled a chair close to the bed, the metal legs scraping quietly. I just sat, listening to the machines. His eyelids fluttered. I leaned forward. "Grandfather?" His eyes opened, just a slit. They were hazy, unfocused. He seemed to be looking through me. Then, his gaze sharpened. He saw me. His hand, which was covered in IV tape, twitched on the blanket. He tried to lift it. I reached out and took it. His skin was paper-thin and cold. His lips moved, but the ventilator mask muffled the sound. "What?" I leaned in, my ear just inches from his mouth. He drew a breath, a rattling, shallow thing. His voice was a bare whisper, a dry rustle of leaves. "Don't," he rasped. "Don't let them." "Don't let them what?" "Repeat history." His eyes were intense now, burning with a last, frantic energy. With Elena. Don't let them bury Elena." My mother. He was thinking of my mother. I won't, I whispered back, my throat tight. I'm fighting. I have the drive. His fingers tightened on mine, a surprising, weak spasm of strength. Good. The new will, Harlan, it's all there. The new will? Grandfather? Don't be afraid, he whispered, and his eyes closed. The grip relaxed. The machines continued their steady, rhythmic beeping. He had slipped back into unconsciousness. I sat there, his words echoing in my head. New will. Harlan arrived an hour later, as if summoned. He looked at Walter, then at me. Any change? He woke up, I said. He spoke. He mentioned a new will. Harlan's face remained impassive. He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a thick, legal-sized envelope, sealed with red wax, bearing his firm's insignia. He handed it to me. Your grandfather, Harlan said, in his precise, dry voice, is a thorough man. He anticipated this. He anticipated many possibilities. What is this? It is a legal instrument. My instructions from him were very clear. You are to keep this. Do not open it. You are only to open it in one of two circumstances. 1, upon his death, or 2, if Vivian Lane attempts to remove him from this hospital and take him into her private care at the mansion. I looked at the envelope. It was heavy. Why? Why would she do that? In the hospital, Harlan explained. He is under the care of state-employed doctors. He is a patient. His medical chart is a legal record. At the mansion. He is a private citizen. He is under her roof. She would have total control over his medication, his visitors, his access to legal counsel. She could, in effect, make him disappear. A cold dread, far colder than the hospital air, settled in my stomach. My answer came the next morning. The board of directors had, in Walter's absence, convened an emergency session. Vivian, as the wife of the heir apparent, Mark, had been invited to speak, and she had, with tears in her eyes, made a passionate, moving plea. Her beloved father-in-law, she'd argued, was dying in a cold, sterile room, surrounded by strangers and beeping machines. He deserved to be at home. He deserved to be in his own bed, surrounded by his loving family. He deserved to die with dignity. The board, moved by her performance and anxious to have a stable family situation, had agreed. They had signed off on his release into family care, against the strenuous medical advice of his cardiac team. When I found out, I ran to Harlan. She's doing it. She's taking him home. Then she has made her move, he said, his face grim. And now, we must make ours. A week later, Walter was transferred. It was a production. A private ambulance, a full team of private nurses. I stood on the lawn, hidden by a large oak tree, and watched them wheel him inside. I was not invited. I was, once again, the outsider. For a few days, the news from the house, filtered through Harlan, was positive. He was stable. He was resting comfortably. He was regaining strength. Then, the first shoe dropped. His longtime personal physician, a man who had treated him for 30 years, was dismissed. In his place, a new doctor was hired, a concierge doctor from D.C., who specialized in holistic, in-home care for high-net-worth individuals. I knew his face. I had seen it before, in the glossy pages of the Richmond magazine, standing right next to Vivian at a charity gala. He was one of hers. She now controlled his medical care. She had her hand on the plug. I met Harlan in a parked car on a quiet street, 2 miles from the mansion. It's time, I said. Yes, he replied. He looked pale. Before you open that, Dylan, you need to understand the full scope of what he has done, what you are now a part of. He took a deep breath, a very un-Harlan-like show of emotion. Walter was not just suspicious of Vivian. He was profoundly, deeply ashamed of his son, of the family, and of himself, for letting it all happen. He saw, in you, a way to reset, to fix what he had broken. What did he do, Harlan? He changed his will 3 weeks ago, after Thanksgiving, before he collapsed. It is ironclad. I was there. So was a judge and a team of psychiatrists to confirm his competency, because he knew, Vivian would contest it. He changed it? He didn't just change it, Dylan. He revolutionized it. He has left your father, Mark, a very generous trust, enough to live comfortably, but with no controlling interest in the foundry. He has left Vivian, Avery, and Logan, $1 each, a symbolic, and very public, disinheritance. I couldn't breathe. $1? But the rest? The foundry? The stock? The assets? Harlan looked me directly in the eyes. He left all of it, the controlling shares of Lane Foundry and Steel, his entire personal fortune, all of it. He split it into 2 equal parts. Half, he said, goes to establish a new, independent charitable foundation, fully endowed. He named it the Elena and Walter Lane Foundation. I felt the tears, hot and sudden, for the first time. He had remembered her. He had undone Vivian's cruelty. And the other half? I whispered. The other half, Harlan said. His personal fortune, his stock, his properties, he left to you, to Dylan Carroll. You are, as of his death, the majority shareholder of the company. You will be one of the wealthiest women in the country. The car was silent. The weight of his words was crushing. It was not a gift. It was a burden. It was an entire empire. Harlan, I said, my voice shaking. She will never let that happen. If she finds out. She will fight, Harlan said, his voice hard. She will move to have him declared incompetent. She will say you manipulated a senile old man. She will paint you as the gold digger she always wanted you to be. And if that doesn't work, I asked, the cold dread from the hospital returning. Harlan didn't answer. He just looked at the mansion. She has him in that house, I whispered. With her own doctor. She could hasten his natural end, make him sign a new will, a new will. He could be dead by morning, and we would never know. This, Harlan said, tapping the sealed envelope in my lap, is your only weapon. It is his final testimony. Now, you have to choose. We fight this in the shadows, or we tear the entire house down in public. The moment you open that, the war becomes real. That night, I did not go to a hotel. I could not leave. I walked the perimeter of the vast, dark estate, staying in the shadows of the trees. The house was dark, except for one window on the second floor, a single, solitary light, glowing warm and yellow against the night. It was his room. I stood there, in the cold, damp Virginia night, staring at that light. I was the girl from the attic, the prep cook, the ghost, and now I was the sole heir to a billion-dollar legacy. I understood, with a clarity that was as sharp and cold as the air, that my grandfather had not just left me his money, he had left me his fight. He was the one person who had trusted me, and that trust was now worth everything. It was worth the entire Lane empire, and I was the only one left to protect him. The light in my grandfather's window stayed on for 2 nights. On the 3rd night, it went out. The call came from Harlan, not from my father. It came at 4 a.m. He's gone, Dylan. Harlan's voice was flat, exhausted. The doctor pronounced him dead 45 minutes ago. Natural causes, a peaceful passing in his sleep. Those are the words you will be hearing. I was sitting in my rental car, 2 miles from the mansion, where I had been keeping a useless, desperate vigil. I closed my eyes. The man who had seen me, the one person who had finally seen me, was gone. And the woman who had likely ensured his peaceful passing was now in control. I had the envelope from Harlan, still sealed, on the passenger seat. I had the USB drive in my pocket. He had died. It was time. The official press release, drafted by Vivian's PR team and released at dawn, was a monument to her audacity. It described Walter Lane's final days as a cherished, quiet time, surrounded by his adoring family. It quoted Vivian extensively about his gentle heart and unwavering love for his son, Mark, and his grandchildren, Avery and Logan. It celebrated the legacy of love he built with his devoted wife, Vivian. It was a masterful act of erasure. My name was not mentioned. My mother's name, Elena, was not mentioned. We were not part of the legacy of love. We were, as Vivian had always wished, buried. The funeral was set for a week later, at the oldest, most prestigious Episcopal church in Richmond. It was not a funeral, it was a state event. The guest list, published in the society pages, was a roll call of Virginia politics, East Coast finance, and corporate power, governors, senators, bank CEOs, and media moguls all flew in to pay their respects, and more importantly, to take the measure of the new power structure at Lane Foundry and Steel. I arrived alone. I wore a simple, new black dress I had bought at a department store, the most expensive piece of clothing I had ever owned, and it still felt cheap and inadequate next to the sea of bespoke morning suits and designer black silk. I slipped into a back pew, invisible, just another face in the crowd. The church was a cavern of dark wood, stained glass, and the funereal scent of white lilies, so thick and heavy it was hard to breathe. The air was oppressive, a performance of collective, important grief. Vivian, my father, Avery, and Logan sat in the front pew. The family. Vivian was a vision of tragic, perfect widowhood. She wore a simple, obscenely expensive black sheath dress and a delicate, netted veil. She was weeping, her shoulders shaking, dabbing at her red-rimmed eyes. My father, beside her, looked like a hollowed-out version of himself, his skin gray, his eyes vacant. He was leaning on her, a prop for her performance. Avery and Logan looked stern and important, like young heirs accepting their new mantle. The priest, a man with a smooth baritone voice, began his eulogy. He spoke of Walter the industrialist, Walter the visionary, Walter the philanthropist. He spoke of the Lane family, a cornerstone of Richmond, a testament to American values. And then, he said it. Walter's life was one of great joy and great loss. He cherished his son, Mark, and Mark's wonderful family, Vivian, Avery, and Logan, just as he cherished the memory of his first wife, Elena, and their child, Dylan. That was it. My mother and I, reduced to a footnote, a single, passing clause, bundled together in the past tense, a shadow in the bright, blinding genealogy of the true Lanes. I looked at Vivian, even through the veil. I could see her jaw tighten. Even a historical mention was too much for her. After the service, as the powerful and wealthy filed out to their black cars, I stood, unsure what to do. The envelope in my purse felt like a brick. Harlan appeared at my side, a ghost in a dark suit. "Dylan, come with me. The reading is now." Reading? The will, as per your grandfather's instructions. In the vestry, he was specific about the audience. He led me through a small, carved wooden door to the side of the altar. We entered a private room, an office for the clergy, paneled in dark wood, with a heavy table at its center. It was quiet. The organ music from the main hall muffled. The air was thick, not with grief, but with suspense. It did not feel like a church. It felt like a courtroom, moments before a verdict. They were already there. Vivian had removed her veil. Her eyes were red. Yes, but they were not soft. They were sharp, assessing, angry. She was sitting at the head of the table, as if it were her new throne. Avery and Logan stood behind her, one at each shoulder, like a pair of badly cast bodyguards, their faces set in identical expressions of smug superiority. My father, Mark, was at the other end of the table, staring at the wood grain. He looked 10 years older than he had at Thanksgiving. He looked utterly, completely defeated. He did not look up when I entered. He would not meet my eyes. Harlan took his place at the table, opposite Vivian. He placed his briefcase on the polished wood and opened it. I took the only remaining chair, near the door, isolated from the family unit. "This is ridiculous! Harlan!" Vivian said, her voice a low, raspy approximation of grief. "Can this not wait? I have just buried my father-in-law." "My apologies, Vivian," Harlan said, his voice flat, formal. "My instructions from Walter were explicit. The reading of his last will and testament was to take place immediately following the funeral service, with only those present in this room." Vivian sneered. "And why exactly? Is she here?" She gestured at me, a flick of her hand, as if shooing away a fly. "Your grandfather wished her to be," Harlan said. He pulled out a sheaf of thick, watermarked paper, bound in a blue legal cover. "Let's get on with it, then," Avery snapped, crossing his arms. "We have guests to attend to." Harlan began to read. The legal language was dense, full of herewiths and aforementions. He started with minor bequests, a painting to a museum, a small sum to the church. And then he got to the heart of it. "To my son, Mark Lane." Harlan read, "I bequeath a trust in the amount of $20 million to be managed by an independent executor, providing him with a generous annual income for the remainder of his natural life. This sum is his full and final inheritance, with no controlling interest in Lane Foundry and Steel or any of its subsidiaries." Mark didn't flinch. He had been expecting it. Vivian, however, looked at him with sheer contempt. "Only $20 million. To my step-grandson, Logan, and step-granddaughter, Avery," Harlan continued, his voice droning on, "I bequeath the sum of $1 each, as a token of my acknowledgement of their place in my son's life." "What?" Logan exploded, stepping forward. $1? Is this a joke?" "He's senile," Avery said, his face turning a blotchy red. "He was crazy." "Please," Harlan said, holding up a hand. "I am not finished." Vivian was silent, her hands clasped on the table. She was staring at Harlan, a look of murderous calculation in her eyes. She was waiting for her name. "To my wife, Vivian Lane," Harlan read, "I bequeath the sum of $1, for reasons she, and God, will understand." The room stopped. The air pressure changed. Even the muffled organ music seemed to die. Vivian's face was white. She stared at Harlan. She did not speak. She did not move. "And finally," Harlan said, turning a page, "all the rest, residue, and remainder of my estate, including all personal property, real estate, and my full controlling shares of stock in Lane Foundry and Steel, I divide into 2 equal parts." Harlan paused. "Part 1. I bequeath to establish a new, fully endowed charitable foundation, to be named the Elena and Walter Lane Foundation, dedicated to nursing scholarships and community aid." Vivian made a sound, a low, strangled noise, as if she had been struck. Elena. He had put her name on it. "Part 2, Harlan concluded, his voice clear and final. "Representing the other half of my assets and the controlling majority of the company, I bequeath, in its entirety, to my beloved granddaughter, Dylan Carroll." The silence that followed was a black hole. It sucked all the air, all the light, from the room. Vivian slowly pushed her chair back, the legs scraping with a sound like a scream. She stood up. "No," she said. Her voice was not a yell. It was a low, guttural, animal sound. "No, absolutely not. Impossible." She slammed her hand on the table. "He was senile. He was a dying, confused old man. And this thing." She pointed at me, her fingers shaking with so much rage I thought it would snap. "This kitchen girl, this fox from Savannah. She wormed her way in." "Mom, he was crazy," Logan said, his voice pleading. "We all knew it. He was losing his mind." Avery lunged, not at Harlan, but at me. He stopped just short of the table. "You!" he yelled, his face contorted. "You did this, you little snake! You whispered in his ear. You probably cried your pathetic sob story about your mother, and he bought it. You manipulated a senile old man to get his money. It's all her fault, Vivian shrieked, her perfect funeral mask completely gone, revealing the raw, ugly greed beneath. She turned, not on me, but on my father. She began to hit him, pounding on his shoulder with her clenched fists. It's your fault! I told you to control her. I told you to keep her away. You let your bastard daughter in the house and she killed your father. She killed him and she has stolen our lives. She has stolen our children's future. My father just sat there, taking the blows, his eyes still fixed on the table, tears rolling silently down his gray cheeks. Vivian, please, he stammered. Please, don't. This is a farce, Vivian screamed, whirling back to Harlan. I will see you disbarred. I will contest this. I will prove in a court of law that he was mentally incompetent, that he was under undue influence, that he was brainwashed by this nothing. Harlan remained perfectly, infuriatingly calm. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small, flat object, a tablet. Walter anticipated you would feel that way. Vivian, he said. He pressed a button. My grandfather's face filled the screen. It was him, not the pale, dying man in the hospital bed. This was the Walter I had met in the library. He was sitting at his desk. He was wearing his suit. His eyes were sharp, clear, and angry. It is November 28th, he said, his voice booming, full, and vital from the speakers. The day after Thanksgiving, it is 10 o'clock in the morning. I am of sound mind and body, and I am saying this in the presence of my lawyer, Mr. Harlan, and a certified notary, to be appended to my will. Vivian froze. This was not a deathbed video. This was from before the hospital. I have, this day, Walter in the video continued, changed my will. I have done so because I have discovered that my foundation, under the management of my daughter-in-law, Vivian Lane, has been systematically defrauded. She has been embezzling millions of dollars, using shell companies, including one named Pinnacle Crest Imports, owned by her brother, to launder money intended for charity. Vivian let out a small, choked gasp. I am leaving my company, my grandfather said, his voice like iron. To the one person in my family who has shown integrity, the one person who has not been corrupted by the money I made, my granddaughter, Dylan Carroll. She is my mother's blood. She is Elena's daughter. She has character. She will know what to do. He looked directly into the camera, and I felt as if he were in the room, his gaze burning right through Vivian. I am disinheriting Vivian, Avery, and Logan, not out of senility, he boomed, but out of clarity. They are products of greed. They are not my legacy. This is my true and final testament. So help me God. Harlan stopped the video. The room was deathly quiet. Vivian's face was a terrible, bloodless mask. She was breathing in short, shallow pants. She had been beaten. She had been outmaneuvered from beyond the grave. She turned, her movements stiff, robotic. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a hatred so pure, so concentrated. It was almost beautiful. It was the most honest expression I had ever seen on her face. She smiled, a tight, bloodless, terrifying smile. This, she whispered, is not over. This is a fake, a deep fake. Do you hear me? It's all faked. I will fight this. I will drag you through every court in this country. She turned and marched out of the room, her children scrambling in her wake, like pilot fish following the shark. My father remained, slumped at the table, a man broken in two. Harlan began to pack his briefcase. You should go, Dylan, he said quietly. The front entrance. But, my father, I looked at the whimpering, gray man at the end of the table. He made his choice, Harlan said, not unkindly. Years ago, go. I stood up, my legs shaking. I felt nothing. I was numb. I was the majority shareholder of Lane Foundry and Steel. I was the head of the Elena and Walter Lane Foundation. I was the girl who had been slapped in the kitchen. I pushed open the heavy vestry door, back into the main lobby of the church. And the world exploded. The press, they had been waiting. They must have been tipped off. Not about the will, but about me. The mysterious granddaughter, the family feud. A dozen reporters, cameras flashing, microphones extended, swarmed me. The flashes were blinding, turning the dark church into a flickering, strobing nightmare. Dylan Carroll. Dylan, is it true you've been disinherited? Ms. Carroll, why did the family exclude you from the eulogy? Are the rumors of a family feud true? Vivian Lane says you're an unstable gold digger. Do you have a comment? I was paralyzed, blinded, trapped. I put my hand up to shield my face, which only made me look guilty. I tried to push through, but they were a wall of bodies. And then, I heard her voice, cutting through the chaos. Vivian. She had come out a different door and was standing on the church steps, a tragic, brave figure, addressing her own bank of reporters. "This is just the beginning, Dylan," she shouted, her voice breaking with grief, loud enough for every camera to pick it up. "You think you've won? You think you can destroy this family? You have no idea what you've just started." The cameras all swung to her, then back to me, then to her. We were the show. I finally broke through the line, stumbling out the massive front doors, down the stone steps, and into the gray, cold afternoon. I ran, my cheap heels clattering on the pavement, the sound of camera shutters clicking behind me. Like 1,000 tiny, angry insects, the public war had begun. Vivian did not wait for the ink to dry on my grandfather's death certificate. She acted with the speed and brutality of a cornered animal. Hiring a notoriously aggressive law firm from New York, they filed a petition in Virginia State Court to have the will declared null and void. The official charges were exactly what Harlan had predicted: lack of mental capacity and undue influence. The story, as her lawyers painted it, was simple and tragic. A beloved patriarch, in his declining, confused final days, had been cruelly manipulated by an estranged, gold-digging granddaughter. I was the villain. She was the grieving widow fighting to protect her family's true legacy. The press, still circling from the funeral, descended like vultures. The story was irresistible. The headlines were brutal. The billion-dollar battle. Steel tycoon's widow sues Savannah prep cook. Lane family at war. Granddaughter accused of manipulating senile grandfather. The attic girl versus the society queen. A fight for the Lane fortune. The court of public opinion was as divided as the press. Half the comments online painted me as a modern-day Cinderella, the underdog standing up to the wicked stepmother. The other half, the louder half, called me a whore, a traitor, a disgusting leech who had come back from obscurity to prey on a dying old man. Vivian's narrative, that I had only appeared when I smelled money, was sticking. The trial began in a packed, overheated courtroom. The air was thick with tension and the smell of expensive perfume. Vivian arrived every day in a uniform of quiet, minimalist mourning. No flashy jewels, no severe designer suits, just simple, dark, elegant dresses. She was playing the role of the grieving, wronged wife to perfection. Her testimony was the first. Her lawyer, a man with a silver voice and the eyes of a shark, led her through her story. She wept, quietly and gracefully. "I loved Walter," she whispered, dabbing her eyes. "He was my life, and to see him, in those last weeks, he wasn't himself. He was confused. He was angry. He didn't know who I was, half the time." "And the defendant, Ms. Carroll?" her lawyer asked, his voice gentle. "She only appeared, after so many years, when she heard he was ill," Vivian said, her voice catching. She saw an opportunity. She would whisper to him, bring him things. I don't know what she told him. I don't know what lies she spun." Her lawyer projected emails onto a large screen for the court. They were mine, emails I had sent to my grandfather after Thanksgiving. "I am looking forward to our next talk. I am thinking about what you said. Out of context, they looked calculating. They looked like undue influence. She was poisoning him against his own family, Vivian cried. Against my son, Mark, against our children. Then, they brought in their star witness, the doctor, Dr. Alistair Finch, the concierge physician Vivian had hired to care for my grandfather in the mansion. He was smooth, handsome, and impeccably credible. He laid out his medical opinion with cold, clinical precision. Mr. Wayne was suffering from severe cognitive decline, Dr. Finch stated, looking at the judge. His cardiac event had resulted in hypoxic brain injury. He was experiencing delusions, paranoia. He was not, in my professional opinion, of sound mind. He was certainly not lucid enough to understand, let alone sign, a complex legal document like a new will. He said it with such authority, such certainty, that I felt my own stomach drop. He was lying, a complete, total professional lie, but he was the one with the medical degree, the one who had been by Walter's bedside. I was just the girl in the kitchen. Harlan, my lawyer, my grandfather's lawyer, sat perfectly still through all of it. He took notes. He did not cross-examine Dr. Finch as aggressively as I'd hoped. He seemed calm. Vivian's legal team rested their case. They looked smug. They had presented a powerful emotional narrative, a sick old man, a grieving wife, and a predatory granddaughter. Then it was Harlan's turn. The defense calls Ms. Maya Sharma to the stand, he said. Maya flew in from Savannah. She walked to the stand, not in a simple suit, but in her neat professional accountant's attire. She looked small, but her voice was steady. Ms. Sharma, Harlan began, you are a forensic accountant? No, sir, Maya said. I am an internal hotel accountant, but I am very, very good with numbers and patterns. Harlan projected the first spreadsheet onto the screen. It was from the USB drive. Can you tell the court what you see here? And Maya began. For 2 hours, she calmly, methodlessly, and brilliantly eviscerated Vivian's entire life. She was not emotional. She was factual. She showed the double-entry wire transfers. Here, Your Honor, March 12th, a $50,000 grant to a real charity, the West Virginia Literacy Project. And here, same day, same amount, coded identically, to a global outreach partners. One check is real, the other is a ghost. She pulled up the Hope Horizons website, the one with the stock photos. She showed the court the offshore accounts, the shell companies. She showed them how Pinnacle Crest Imports, the company owned by Vivian's brother, had received over $4 million in consulting fees from the Lane Foundation over 3 years, for no discernible services. The courtroom, which had been sympathetic to Vivian, went very, very quiet. This was no longer a family squabble. This was high-level, organized crime. The narrative of a greedy granddaughter is a compelling one, Harlan said, walking back to his table. But it has one flaw. The data, the numbers, Your Honor, do not lie. The judge, a stern older woman, stared at the screen. The court orders a full, independent forensic audit of the Lane Family Foundation, effective immediately. Vivian's face was ashen. Her lawyers were scrambling, whispering furiously. The narrative had changed. But Harlan was not done. Your Honor, he said, the plaintiff, Mrs. Lane, has built her case on the premise that Mr. Walter Lane's confusion and delusions caused him to disinherit her. We argue that he was, in fact, acting with more clarity than ever before, based on his discovery of this very fraud. But, Harlan continued, his voice dropping, we must also address the source of the plaintiff's character, her long-standing pattern of behavior, her belief that image and money are more valuable than human lives. Vivian's lawyer leaped to his feet. Objection! Relevance? This is character assassination. It is motive, Your Honor, Harlan said, his voice like cold steel. It goes to the very heart of this case. The plaintiff has just testified that she loved Walter, that she is a victim. We are here to prove that she is, in fact, a predator, and that her cruelty is not a new development. He held up a thin, old file, bound in cardboard. "This," he said, "is a Lane Foundry corporate file from 16 years ago, from the company's medical assistance fund." I stopped breathing. The anonymous text. Why your mother really died. "At the time," Harlan said, "Mrs. Vivian Lane, newly married to Mark, had taken over the charitable giving committees. She was rebranding the company's image." He pulled out a single document. "This is a funding request from St. Mary's Hospital. They were requesting a grant of $150,000 to purchase a new, at the time, high-speed diagnostic scanner for their trauma center." My blood went cold. The hospital, the scan that took too long. "And here," Harlan said, projecting the document, "is the response. The request was delayed, postponed, and the funds were reallocated." I was shaking, my vision tunneling. I could hear my 13-year-old self asking my father, "Why is it taking so long? She's an employee." "And who," Harlan asked, "delayed this request?" He showed the next page, a signature, in a flamboyant, confident script, Vivian Lane. In the margin, Harlan pointed, is her handwritten note. He projected the note. The entire courtroom read it. "This project lacks significant PR value. Reallocate funds to the Lane Foundation Gala. We need a bigger name for the band." I stood up. I didn't mean to. The room was spinning. "Objection, Your Honor," Vivian's lawyer was screaming. This is old news. It has nothing to do." "It has everything to do," I screamed, and the entire courtroom turned to look at me. Harlan put a steadying hand on my shoulder. "The date on that delay," Harlan said to the judge, his voice terrible and quiet, "is October 12th, 2 days later. A nurse named Elena Carroll was brought to that exact hospital after a minor car accident. She had a slow-growing brain bleed, but the hospital's old scanner was too slow, and they were booked. She died waiting for a scan that the new, faster machine, the one Vivian had just denied, could have performed in 10 minutes. I collapsed into my chair. It wasn't incompetence. It wasn't a bureaucratic delay. It was a decision. It was Vivian. She had traded my mother's life for a better party. My mother, Elena, had been murdered by a line-item veto. "This is baseless," Vivian shrieked, her mask of a grieving widow finally, horribly cracking. "It's a lie. It was an accident." "Is it?" Harlan asked. "Because you seem to have been very involved in the rebranding that day. Your Honor, I present Exhibit D." He turned on a large monitor. The image was grainy, black and white, with a timestamp in the corner. Hospital security footage. There, on the screen, was a much younger Vivian. She was in the hospital administrative wing, wearing a sharp suit. She was handing the signed delay form back to a nervous-looking administrator. The camera had no sound, but she did not look conflicted. She did not look sad. She was laughing. She turned to a woman standing next to her, a woman I recognized from her own magazine profiles, her longtime PR agent, and she smiled, a wide, bright, triumphant smile. She said something, and the PR woman laughed. She had been proud. She had saved the company money that she could then spend on a gala, all while denying the very equipment that would have saved her husband's first wife. She was, as she had signed the paper, prioritizing the image. A low, horrified groan filled the courtroom. Several of the Lane family relatives, who had come to support Vivian, were staring at her, their faces pale with shock. My father. I turned to look at him. He was sitting in the back row, not as a witness, but as a spectator. He was not looking at the screen. He had his head in his hands, his entire body shaking, and he was weeping, not silently, but with great, shuddering, public sobs. He had not known, the one, final, darkest secret. He had not known. I turned back to the front. I looked at Vivian. Our eyes met. Her face was no longer a mask. It was the face of a cornered, rabid animal, the hatred, the greed, the cold, calculating evil. It was all there, for the entire world to see. The judge slammed her gavel. The sound was like a gunshot. "Order! Order in this court!" She was breathing heavily, her own face pale. She looked at Vivian, then at me, then at the weeping man in the back row. "This court," she said, her voice shaking with barely controlled fury, "is in recess, pending the full forensic audit." She stood, gathering her robes. She paused, her hand on the door to her chambers, and looked out over the chaotic room. "If what we have seen here today," she said, her voice echoing in the sudden silence, "is proven to be the truth, then the question before this body is no longer simply whether a will is valid. The question is who, if anyone, has the moral right to speak for the legacy of Walter Lane." The forensic audit, ordered by the judge, was a new kind of silence. For 3 weeks, the trial was in recess, and the world seemed to be holding its breath. The headlines died down, replaced by a nervous, quiet anticipation. Vivian had disappeared from public view. Harlan's team, along with the court-appointed auditors, was deep in the digital trenches of the Lane Foundation. I was in a small, beige, extended-stay hotel room in a Richmond suburb. It was anonymous, cheap, and safe. I had not slept in what felt like days. It was the night before the trial was set to reconvene. The audit was complete. The verdict was coming. I sat on the floor, my back against the flimsy wall, staring at the 2 piles of paper I had spread out on the worn carpet. One pile was the fraud, Maya's spreadsheets, the USB data, the millions of dollars, the cold, hard, logical crime. The other pile was the file on my mother, the grainy black and white hospital footage, the handwritten note, "Lacks PR value." The first pile was why I would win the company. The second pile was why it mattered. If I won, I would be a billionaire. The word itself tasted strange, like ash. Dylan Carroll, the girl from the attic, the prep cook, would be in control of Lane Foundry and Steel. I would be one of the most powerful women in Virginia. I had never wanted their money. I had hated their money. I had hated what it did to them, how it hollowed them out, how it made them rank human life on a scale of PR value. And now, in a moment of supreme cosmic irony, I was about to inherit all of it. I was terrified. I was terrified that the money would do to me what it had done to them, that in 20 years, I would be the one in a cashmere dress, making cold decisions, burying someone else's mother for the sake of efficiency. I was afraid of becoming Vivian. There was a knock at the door. It was soft, hesitant, not the sharp, confident rap of a lawyer. I froze. I was not expecting anyone. I walked to the door, my heart hammering. I looked through the peephole. The man standing in the hallway was a stranger, and he was my father. He looked ancient. His expensive suit was wrinkled, the collar unbuttoned, as if he had been sleeping in it for a week. His hair was uncombed. His face was a gray, ravaged landscape of stubble and broken blood vessels. His eyes, when they met the peephole, were red-rimmed and hollow. This was the first time in my adult life he had come to see me, alone, without Vivian. I opened the door. He just stood there for a moment, looking at me as if I were a ghost. "Dylan," he whispered. His voice was a dry croak. Can I come in?" I stepped back, and he shuffled into the small, messy room. He looked at the papers on the floor, at my single suitcase in the corner, at the fast food bag on the desk. He was a man who had lived his entire life in mansions, and he had just stepped onto a different planet. He did not sit. He just stood in the center of the room, turning slowly, a man looking for a foothold. He began, then stopped. "What do you want, Dad?" My voice was cold. I had no energy left for him. "I am a coward," he said, the words bursting out of him in a dry sob. He said it to the floor, not to me. "I am a coward." I waited. It was the truest thing he had ever said. "All these years," he stammered, his hands twisting together. I chose the easy way. I always chose the easy way. Vivian, she made life so simple. She handled the board. She handled the money. She handled the image. All I had to do was not ask, not look too closely. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. I told myself it was for the company, that she was just aggressive, that she was smart. I told myself it was what father would have wanted, a strong partner. You knew, I said. It was not a question. You knew she was stealing. He flinched. I suspected. I knew she was creative with the foundation accounts. I saw the budgets. I saw her brother's name. I did not want to know. It was easier not to know. A lot of things are easier not to know, I said, my voice flat. And the will, he continued, the confession pouring out of him now, unstoppable. My father, before he signed it, after Thanksgiving, he called me. He showed it to me. My head snapped up. He showed it to you? Yes, he whispered, ashamed. He sat me down in his library. He looked at me, and he said, Mark, I am about to disinherit your wife. I am about to leave this company to your daughter. This is your last chance. Be a man. Stand up and tell me what you are going to do about it. And what did you do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My father's face crumpled. I did what I always do, he wept. I said, it's your money, Father. It's your choice. I said nothing. I let him do it. I was a coward. He was quiet, his shoulders shaking. He had failed his father's final test. Dylan, he said, his voice changing, becoming urgent. Please, I know the will is valid. I know you've won. But tomorrow, the criminal part, the audit. He took a shuffling step toward me. She is broken. This has destroyed her. They are talking about prison. Dylan, the lawyers, they are talking about federal charges. She will not survive that. She survived my mother's death just fine, I said. The words hit him like a physical blow. I know, but the boys, he was using them, his last card. Avery and Logan, they are innocent in this. They are still my children. She is their mother. Whatever she is their mother. If you push this, if you go for the criminal charges, you will be destroying them, too. And then, he did it. The one thing I never thought I would see. Mark Lane, my father, heir to the Lane fortune, sank to his knees. He knelt on the cheap, stained carpet of my hotel room, a feudal lord begging for his life. Please, he sobbed, reaching out, though not quite daring to touch me. Please, Dylan, don't be ruthless. Don't be like her. Show mercy. Mercy, the word. It was a lit match in a gas-filled room. I looked down at the kneeling, weeping man who had abandoned me, and I felt a profound, cold rage. Mercy, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through his sobbing. He looked up, his face a ruin of tears and snot. You are kneeling in my hotel room, begging for mercy for her. I walked over to the desk, picked up the file, and walked back. I threw it on the floor in front of him, the grainy black and white photo of Vivian, smiling, signing the paper, was on top. Was my mother innocent, Dad? He recoiled, as if the paper had burned him. Dylan, don't. Was she innocent? I yelled, the dam of my control finally breaking. When you were choosing comfort, when you were letting Vivian make everything easy, did you ever, once, in 16 years, ask what really happened that night? Did you ever wonder why the scan took 5 hours at the hospital her own husband's family supported? I thought it was just the hospital, he stammered from the floor. It was her, I screamed, jabbing my finger at the photo. It was her, saving money for a gala. She traded my mother's life for a better band. And you are here, on your knees, begging me to show her mercy? I was pacing, a caged animal. Where were you? Where were you when Mom needed you to fight for her? Where were you when I was living in the attic? Where were you at Thanksgiving when she hit me in the face? The questions, a lifetime of them, rained down on him. He wasn't just crying anymore. He was wailing, a raw, ugly, animal sound of a man who has finally been forced to look at the full, unvarnished truth of his own soul. He was a hollow man. He was nothing. The anger went out of me, as suddenly as it had come, replaced by a vast, cold emptiness. I was just tired. Get up, I said. He struggled, using the side of the cheap hotel bed to pull himself to his feet. He was a wreck. I looked at this man, my father, and I finally understood what I had to do. I don't want to be cruel, I said, my voice flat, exhausted. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm not her. I am not going to spend my life trying to make her hurt. A small, pathetic flicker of hope ignited in his eyes. Then, you'll stop? You'll tell Harlan to— No, I said. I'm not doing this for revenge. I am doing this because it is the truth. I am sick. I am so sick of my mother being a footnote, of her being the messy past that Vivian got to bury. I'm tired of being the girl in the attic, the lie, the secret. Tomorrow, the truth comes out. I looked him in the eye. I am not going to push for prison. I am not going to be vindictive, but I am not going to stop the truth, either. I will uphold the will. I will expose the fraud. And I will let the state of Virginia and the IRS and the judge decide what to do with Vivian. I am taking my hand off the scale. That is my mercy. He looked at me, really looked at me, and he saw his father. He saw Walter's clarity. He straightened up. He was still shaking, but something in his spine, something long broken, seemed to reset. Tomorrow, he said, his voice thick and new. Harlan, he asked me to testify, months ago. I said no. I said I couldn't. I know, I said. I am going to, he said. Tomorrow, when court reconvenes, I am going to testify. I will tell them everything. I'll tell them I knew about the will. I'll tell them I suspected her. I'll tell them what I did, what I didn't do. It's not for you. Dylan, it's not to save you. His eyes were clear for the first time. It's for her. It's for Elena. It's the only thing I have left to give her. It was the one, single, brave moment of his entire life. I looked at him, at this stranger who had given me life and nothing else. I could not find forgiveness, but I could see the shape of it, far in the distance. If you say you're going to do it, Dad, I said, you have to do it. I will. Because tomorrow, in that courtroom, it's not just the judge watching. My voice was quiet. They're watching. Mom is watching. Grandfather is watching. Don't disappoint them again. He nodded, a man accepting his own, long overdue sentence. He walked to the door, opened it, and left, without looking back. I couldn't stay in the room. The air was too thick with his confession. I grabbed my jacket and walked out into the cold November night. I didn't know where I was going, but my feet knew. I walked for miles. I found myself standing in front of the old Episcopal church, the one from the funeral. It was dark, the stone facade bathed in cold moonlight. A side door, one I remembered from that day, was unlocked, a small sign saying, "Open for prayer." I slipped inside. The air was cold and smelled of old wood, beeswax, and the lingering, ghostly scent of 10,000 lilies. The massive sanctuary was empty. I walked down the central aisle and sat in a wooden pew, right in the middle. I sat, in the dark, in the silence, and I stared at the altar. I imagined my mother, Elena, sitting on my left. Her hand was warm, practical, the faint smell of cinnamon on her skin. I imagined my grandfather, Walter, on my right. He wasn't sitting, he was standing, his presence a solid, unmovable block of iron. I sat there, between my two ghosts, and I was terrified. I was terrified of the money. I was terrified of the power. I was terrified of the woman I was about to become. But sitting there, in the silence, another feeling rose up, a strange, cold, lucid peace. I was not Vivian. I was not my father. I was Elena's daughter, and I was Walter's heir. The ending was already written. The verdict was just a formality. All that was left was for me to walk in and claim it. The courtroom was a silent, breathing creature. It was packed. Standing room only. The press, the remaining Lane relatives, the corporate lawyers, the curious public. They were all here to watch the final act. Vivian sat at her table, flanked by her New York legal team. She was a statue of ice, her face perfectly composed, but her knuckles were white where she gripped her pen. She was ready for the judge's final ruling on the audit. The judge entered. We all stood. "The court is reconvened," she said, her voice stern. "The forensic audit is complete and has been submitted to my chambers. Before I deliver my final judgment on the petition, Mr. Harlan, does the defense have any final witnesses?" Vivian's lawyer looked bored. It was a formality. "Yes, Your Honor," Harlan said, his voice clear and calm. "The defense calls Mark Lane to the stand." The entire courtroom inhaled at the same time. Vivian's head snapped toward my father, who was sitting in the public gallery. Her lawyer leaped to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Lane is not on our witness list. This is a desperate, last-minute tactic." "Mr. Lane is the plaintiff's husband and a party of interest," Harlan countered smoothly. "He has volunteered to testify for the defense." "Overruled," the judge said, her eyes narrowing, suddenly fascinated. "Mr. Lane, please approach." My father stood up. He was not the gray, weeping man from my hotel room. He was in a simple, dark suit. His hair was combed. He looked tired, but he looked sober. He looked, for the first time, like his own man. He walked to the stand, was sworn in, and sat. Vivian was staring at him, her eyes wide, her mask not just cracking but shattering. This was a betrayal she had not anticipated. This he was not supposed to do. "Mr. Lane," Harlan began, "you were present at Thanksgiving, the day after your father allegedly signed this new will?" "Yes," my father said, his voice quiet but clear, mic'd for the whole room. "And in your opinion, was your father, Walter Lane, of sound mind?" "Objection!" Vivian's lawyer shouted. "This is hearsay. He is not a medical expert." "Mr. Lane is the man's son," Harlan said. "I believe his opinion is uniquely relevant." "Overruled," the judge said. "Answer the question. Mr. Lane." My father turned, not to Harlan, but to the judge. He looked at her, his eyes full of a terrible, clear sadness. "Your Honor," he said, My father was never more clear in his life. He was angry. He was precise. He was my father, the man I always knew. He was not senile. He was not confused. He was, finally, making a hard decision he had put off for years." Vivian let out a small, strangled sound. "And Kais," my father continued, his voice gaining strength. "He showed me the will. Before he signed it, he told me exactly what he was going to do. He told me he was disinheriting my wife and leaving the company to my daughter. Dylan." The courtroom exploded. The judge slammed her gavel. "Order! Order!" "And you knew," Harlan said, his voice a quiet, driving question. "You knew why he was doing this?" My father looked down at his hands. "Yes, he told me. He said he had proof that my wife, that Vivian, was stealing from the foundation. He said it, and And what did you do, Mr. Lane?" I did nothing," my father said, his voice thick. "I was a coward. I have been a coward for 20 years. I suspected. I saw the numbers. I saw how creative she was with the books. I saw her brother's consulting fees, but I was weak. I was afraid of losing my comfortable life. I was afraid of her. He looked up, and for the first time, he looked directly at Vivian, his wife. I let her do it all. I let her run my life, and my company, and I let her bury my first wife, Elena. Vivian's lawyer was frantic. Objection! This is a pre-rehearsed, vindictive performance. Is it? My father asked, his voice suddenly sharp. Is it vindictive to tell the truth? I am here, under oath, to say that the will my father signed is the only true will. He was competent, he was clear, and he was right. I have failed my father. I have failed my daughter. And I have failed. I have failed Elena. I will not fail her again. He was done. The cross-examination was a joke. Vivian's lawyer tried to paint him as a weak, manipulated man, but my father simply, and honestly, agreed. Yes, he said. I was weak. I was manipulated. By my wife, for 20 years. But I am not weak today. It was over. My father's confession had not just supported my case, it had been a public execution of Vivian's. The judge did not even take a recess. She had the audit, she had the confession, she had the will. She called the court to order. After reviewing the exhaustive, and frankly, deeply disturbing, findings of the forensic audit, the judge said, her voice cold. And in light of the testimony of Mr. Mark Lane, this court finds as follows. She took a deep breath. The petition to declare the will of Walter Lane invalid is summarily and emphatically denied. This court finds that Mr. Lane was of exceptionally sound mind and was acting with clear and justifiable intent, based on the rampant, systematic fraud he had uncovered. She looked at me. The court hereby validates the will. Miss Dylan Carroll is the legal and sole heir to the personal assets and controlling shares of Lane Foundry and Steel. As stipulated, the Elena and Walter Lane Foundation is a legal and valid entity. She then turned her gaze on Vivian. Furthermore, based on the overwhelming evidence of financial malfeasance, this court is referring the complete audit and a transcript of this trial to the Attorney General's Office and the Internal Revenue Service for criminal investigation into wire fraud, tax evasion, and embezzlement. Vivian went white. The criminal charges. The one thing her husband had begged me to stop. She did not move. She was in shock. Then, her head turned, slowly, like a predator, and her eyes, empty of everything but a cold, black hatred, found mine. She leaped. She was across the table before the bailiffs could move, a raw scream of "you" tearing from her throat. She was trying to get to me, her hands clawed, her perfect, composed face a mask of pure rage. "You killed this family! You bitch!" 2 bailiffs grabbed her. She fought, a wild, thrashing thing. I just stood there, my heart steady. I looked at her, at this monster, this woman who had murdered my mother and stolen my childhood. "No, Vivian," I said, and my voice was clear, carrying across the silent, shocked courtroom. "You did that a long time ago." They dragged her, screaming, from the room. I turned and looked at Avery and Logan. They were not angry. They were not defiant. They were children. They were huddled together, pale and terrified, watching their mother, their protector, their entire world, get dragged away like a common criminal. They looked at me, not with hatred, but with a new, dawning, horrible understanding, and I felt, for the first of time, not rage, but a strange, hollow pity. They were victims, too, just a different kind. 1 year later. It was Thanksgiving. The air was cold, smelling of wood smoke and damp leaves. But I was not at the mansion. I was in an old, beautiful brick building in a historic part of Virginia, a former Lane property that had sat empty for decades. Now, a new, hand-carved wooden sign hung over the door. The Elena and Walter House, a community center. Inside, the grand hall was not filled with polished silver or crystal. It was filled with mismatched tables, folding chairs, and the sound of life. It was filled with noise and laughter and the smell of real food. 10 turkeys, a mountain of mashed potatoes, green beans, and from my own recipe, 200 lemon thyme tarts. The guests were the families from Sharice's youth center. They were the single mothers from the shelter I had started funding. They were the nursing students who had received the very first Elena Carroll scholarships. They were the people the foundation was now, finally, serving. I was in the kitchen, wearing an apron, my hair a mess, covered in flour, and I was happy. I was plating a tart when I saw him. My father, Mark. He was standing in the doorway, hesitant. He was thinner, he was gray, but his eyes were clear. He was holding a small, simple bouquet of wildflowers. He walked past me, over to the wall where I had hung their pictures. A new one of Walter, smiling at a factory opening, and the one from the library, my mother and me, in the field of flowers. He placed his small bouquet on the table beneath their faces. He stood there for a long time. Then he turned to me. That smells incredible. Dylan, he said. Thanks, Dad. He looked around, at the chaos, at the children running. Is there anything? He gestured. Can I help? The dishes, maybe? I looked at him, the man who had never lifted a finger. I thought about all the years. I thought about the anger, and I felt a quiet space. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a space. I nodded. The aprons are by the sink. We're running low on clean plates. He smiled, a real, small, tired smile, and he walked to the sink. Later, it was time for the blessing. We all gathered, a huge, sprawling, messy circle. We held hands. A nursing student held my left, my father, his hands still wet, took my right. I closed my eyes, a lifetime of habit, and then I opened them. I looked across the room, at the picture of my grandfather. I remembered his eyes, at that other table, the eyes that would not close. Grandfather, I whispered, so low no one could hear. I'm keeping my eyes open this time. I want to see. I want to watch what I'm doing with your legacy. After the meal, as kids ran around with pie, I stood up and tapped a glass. Hi, everyone. I just have one last thing I want to say. The room went quiet. A year ago, I said, I inherited a company, Lane Foundry and Steel. Today, I'm giving it away. A few people gasped. My father just looked at me and smiled. I have transferred the majority of my controlling shares, I explained. Not to a person, but to the Elena and Walter Foundation. From now on, the profits of the steel foundry will belong to you, to this center, to the scholarships, to the shelters. The company will now, officially, work for the community. I kept a small percentage for myself, enough for a new apron. People clapped. A few people cried. Oh, I added. And one last thing. I have also signed an agreement. The legal fees for Mrs. Lane have been paid, and a blind trust has been established for the education of Avery and Logan. They deserve a chance to build something of their own, free of all this. In the background, on a small TV in the corner, the local news was playing, muted. The chyron on the bottom of the screen read, Lane matriarch, Vivian found guilty on all charges, sentencing expected. The courts did their job. My job was this. I stepped out onto the wide, wraparound porch, into the cold, clean night air. I could hear the laughter and the music behind me. It was a warm, yellow light in the dark. I thought about that first Thanksgiving, the pain of the slap, the ringing in my ear, the cold calculation of Vivian's greed, and I thought about my grandfather, his eyes open, watching. I realized, in that moment, what he had done. He hadn't left me a revenge plot. He had left me a choice. True revenge wasn't about making them hurt. It wasn't about pulling them down into the mud you were in. It was about rebuilding, above them, everything they had tried to destroy. It was about taking the broken pieces and making something new and good. That night, I stood in the warm yellow light, listening to the laughter from the dining room, And for the first time in my life, I understood that my grandfather hadn't kept his eyes open because he didn't know how to pray. He kept them open because he wanted to be sure that, one day, I would be the one to open mine, to look straight at the truth, and choose my own ending. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let us know in the comments where you are listening from. We would love to connect and hear your thoughts. Remember to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button to help this story be heard by more people.